Staying alive in the holy fire. You know that St. Bonaventure, great Franciscan, one of them, said, don't ask for understanding, ask for the fire. We all know as Catholics that mystical, the mystical that's at the heart of all of us, the connection between prayer and action, and community, and that individual that's at work for art that you talked about, Jane. So the fire, field notes of the fire. Fire. This is the prelude I write in River of Fire. They killed a man with fire one night. They strapped him in a wooden chair and pumped electricity through his body until he was dead. His killing was a legal act because he had killed. No religious leaders protested the killing that night. But I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And what I saw set my soul on fire, a fire that burns in me still. And now here's an account of how I came to be in the killing chamber that night and the spiritual currents that drew me there. That's the beginning of River of Fire. So that fire was the witnessing of a human being who had done an unspeakable crime and the killing of 2 teenage kids in cold blood. But his killing and the witnessing of his killing in the most premeditated way you can imagine, where he was rendered completely defenseless and then killed, is what set my soul on fire. So here we talk about and share, as Tim Robbins loves to say, as he said about the film A Dead Man Walking, the nun was in over her head. And then Susan tells me that's the kind of role she likes to take about women. They're never victims, but they get in, they make mistakes, they don't know what they're doing, and they grow as they go. And truly that's me, still growing, still learning, always learning as we go. Fire was the awakening to the social gospel of Jesus. Was the awakening of the call to do justice and not just to be a prayerful nun, not just to be pious and polite and kind and charitable to the people around me. The call to do justice, which I resisted. I went, look, we're nuns, we're not social workers. How are we supposed to get involved in all this social justice stuff? Or as some of the parents at a Catholic school said to one of the teachers, look, teach him his faith. Don't teach him all that social justice stuff. Teach him his faith. His faith got to do with social justice. So part of that has to do with growing up in privilege. And so I tell these stories in River. I mean, growing up in privilege, my daddy was a successful lawyer. We had African-American servants, Ellen in the kitchen, Jesse in the yard, lived in the servants' quarters behind the big house, had their own bathroom, never sat at the table with us, sat in the back of the bus, sat in a separate place in church in Sacred Heart. And I never questioned it. Mom and Daddy were kind, but never questioned Jim Crow. Culture puts glasses on us. Culture gives us ears to hear, to look at reality. Well, honey, that's just the way we do things. It's better for the races to be separate and people get into fights. And the gospel awakens us out of culture, awakens us that, wait a minute, the gospel of Jesus, you know, that everyone is my brother and sister. But yet, I don't know the suffering of African American people. And the climax in River of Fire is when I finally make it into the St. Thomas housing projects, live among African American people who don't have a daddy who's a lawyer, who don't have the connections, who don't have the education, who don't know how to write a book, who don't have an awareness of how to be articulate or to be an agent in mainstream society to make things happen, but to be powerless and not connected, and having the police beat you up, and having the banks redline you. And they became my teachers. Fire. Fire. In one of the non-canonical Gospels that we're learning so much about now, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Peter, and one of the things that Jesus says is, the one who's close to me is close to the fire. Fire, the murder victim's families. Big mistake in the beginning. As I wrote a letter to the man on death row's execution you heard about in the prelude, I didn't know what to do with the victim's family. The parents whose children had been murdered, they were all so angry. And the prosecution had them, the prosecution saying to them, here's the justice we're going to do for you. And said to that jury in the closing arguments of the trial of advocating for the death penalty, look at that family sitting there. They're never going to see their son, their daughter graduate from college. You'll never see your grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, do justice for that family. And what did justice translate into? The terrible crime they did to their child, that's what we must do to them. Justice demands. They didn't respect the human rights of their victims. We don't respect theirs, and they pay for their lives. The fire, the victim's family. The big mistake, staying away from them. And that's at the crunch of Dead Man Walking. God, I had a good editor. You never would have heard of Dead Man Walking if I hadn't had Jason Epstein. I only worked with great Jewish people at Random House. And Dead Man Walking and The Death of Innocence. But Jason, when he looks at the first draft of Dead Man Walking, he goes, Helen, you wait far too long to talk about the crime. These two kids were killed in cold blood. And you wait, I don't know, and nobody's going to read your book. This was in the 90s, where everybody and their cat in the United States supported the death penalty. What was the chance of that book ever making any kind of impact? And he said they're going to say, well, she's a nun. She's a spiritual advisor to the poor murderer. She believes in Jesus and forgiveness. What's going to be the story here? It's all predictable. I'm not reading this book. And then he takes it, and so we go, in the first 10 pages, you got to say what happened to those teenage kids. And you got to share your own outrage at that crime, and that the reader knows you stand in the outrage that they feel at this crime. And then your job is on every page of the book to slowly take them with you, so that when they witness this man who did the crime, who's rendered completely defenseless and strapped in that chair and killed, they can feel for him as a human being. That's the journey of Dead Man Walking. And if you let that tension slip on any page, the book will fail. We all know that. Anybody who's a journalist, anybody who writes stories, to be fair to the struggle on both sides of the issue. On the abortion issue, what about the woman? Who's the woman, and what is her situation? Where she's faced with bringing a child in the world. Where's the man? What is the stress she's under? What is she under? As Archbishop Tutu said about what would make the man who's a father of a family strap a bomb on his back and get into a bus and blow himself up, and a lot of people. That's got to be desperation. What is desperation? Desperation makes us act in desperate ways, and we kill people. So the victim's family. So then he's also helping me, Jason Epstein. Here we get back. When I get to the victim's family, I had simply said in the first draft, well, I didn't know what to do with the victim's family. I mean, they were all so angry. You know, they'd listen to the prosecutor. This is what they had to do. And I stayed away from it. And he goes, you're letting yourself off far too easy in this, Helen. I mean, that was a big mistake. Look, when you're writing a book, you got to be truthful about your mistakes. Just talk about your mistake. Admit it. That it was a huge mistake to not reach out to the victim's family. And so then I go back to that, of course. And then I realize the real hero, if you want to talk about fire, is Lloyd LeBlanc, whose son David, their only son, was 17 years old. And he was one of the people killed by Patrick Saunier and his brother. left for dead in a sugarcane field, shot in the back of the head. This beautiful kid. And here's his father. And when I do meet the victims' families, at the worst possible time, it couldn't have been more polarized. It was at the pardon board hearing. 1 week before Pat's to be executed. Eddie got a life sentence. And so I go to the pardon board, and you sign the Blooming Book when you go into a pardon board hearing in Louisiana, which side you're on, literally, life or death. So I'm on a life side with 2 other people. I asked the pardon board of Louisiana, don't kill Patrick Saunier, let him spend the rest of his life in prison, and that is when I met the victims' families. They were there with their relatives, they were there with their friends. They had been told by the prosecutor, this is your last chance to get your justice. And so they packed the place. And here comes the nun, in over her head. But I knew what I had to do, and it was to try to persuade that pardon board not to kill this man. And that's when I met them. We were walking outside while the pardon board was voting. I rounded a corner, and I ran right into the Bourques, whose daughter Loretta had been killed by Pat and Eddie Saunier, and the LeBlancs, Eula and Lloyd LeBlanc. Surprised by grace. Pope Francis talks about the gospel of encounter, the gospel of getting out, of encountering, and here it comes. And it's in the person of Lloyd LeBlanc, who walks right up to me and says, Sister Helen, where have you been all this time? You've been visiting those 2 brothers and you didn't want to come see us. And we haven't had anybody to talk to. You can't believe the pressure that we're under to be for the death penalty. And I know about Jesus. I'm a Catholic. I went to a Christian Brothers school. I don't want to be for the death penalty. I haven't had anybody to talk to. Sister, where you been? He was the gracious one. And he invited me to come pray with him in this little chapel. It was an invitation I could not refuse. He was the one who took me into his journey of how you start with just this hatred and anger and rage and wanted to kill the people who killed your child, and he almost lost his wife. He said, we had to move David's grave to be close so that you can go to it every day, as she can't make it through her day. And sorrow, like I'd never in my life experienced. And he takes me into his heart and into his journey, and how he made his way through with the grace of God and the gospel of Jesus to the other side. And the way he put it was, people think forgiveness is weak, like you're condoning. Oh, you kill my son, I forgive you. He said, my experience was that when I was in this hatred, I was angry at Yule, I was angry at my daughter Vicky. I'm a compassionate person. I'm kind to people. If I see somebody broken down the highway, I'm going to stop and help them because it's who I am. And then he put his hand out like this and he said, then I went, they killed our son, but I'm not going to let them kill me. I'm going to do what Jesus said. And he was the first to teach me. And if you look at the word forgiveness, the giving before, of not letting that hatred be overcome. All the spiritual leaders in Buddhism, in all the spiritual traditions, talk about forgiveness as this deep quality of our soul in which we do not lose our capacity for love, that it's overcome by hate. Lloyd LeBlanc is the hero of Dead Man Walking in the fire. And I have to tell you, the first thing I ever wrote, and John Feaster's in here, Kathy, his wife, is in here, and I went, when I prayed with Lloyd LeBlanc in that little chapel, I said, by the way, where you pray? He said, oh, it's St. Martin Tourist Church. It's one of the oldest churches in Louisiana. It's in St. Martinville. I said, well, when you pray, Lloyd? He goes, 4 to 5 in the morning. I keep vigil for the Blessed Sacrament. That's my hour. I said, 4 to 5 in the morning. Oh, okay. St. Martinville, okay. Go to Baton Rouge the night before. Leave at 2:30. Drive across the Atchafalaya Basin to go pray with Lloyd LeBlanc. And what do we pray? The Rosary. And it's a Friday morning. And it's the mysteries of the suffering and death of Jesus and his own Son. So the first thing I ever wrote was, I said, now what's a good Catholic magazine I could send this to? Because it's going to be about praying the rosary. And I sent it into St. Anthony. There was John. I don't know what capacity you had there or what say-so you had about it, John. But they printed that article of praying with Lloyd LeBlanc and the rosary, and how the beads were like a lifeline of going and hanging on one bead to the other of this tremendous mystery this man was thrown in of the death of his son, and then me, blessed, privileged to pray alongside him. The fire. The field notes come just because I kept a blooming journal all along the way of everything. You know, the whole Ignatian discernment thing of where God's grace is operative and noting it. Not always at the time. When the fire's there at the time, we don't even know it's fire. But we go back, and when we pray, when we meditate, when we take that time to be still and align our lives with Christ and what he teaches us. When we go to Eucharist, I mean, here's fire this morning. I was at Little Sisters of the Poor for aged, elderly people, and to see the kindness of the sisters bringing people to communion, to pray and sing the hymns my mama used to sing in church. Oh Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldst come to me. And with all the people there, there was fire in that. The community is where the fire is, and we meet and gather around our faith, and we blow on the coals again and again and again for that spark and that fire to come of our living faith that motivates us to go out and live it as we're called to live it in a bold way, tackling the things that need to be tackled today. And there are many challenges. The work on the road to bring it out to the people, and you got to tell you this, I know a lot of people are writing. I thought writing was the most passive thing, and the last thing I want to do is write a book, because I thought, well, it just sits on the shelf. I mean, I'm from an oral culture in Louisiana. We tell stories. I mean, you sit around eating seafood for 3 hours and drinking beer, you tell stories. But a book, I said, a book is going to go sit on the shelf. It doesn't even have a little finger to come out and say, hey, read me. Sit there. The words are quiet. It felt so passive. I said, I'm not going to write a book. And then grace works. You know, angels make their way to you. And so here's Bill McKibben, who gives me his literary agent in New York, Gloria Loomis. And so then she knows Jason Epstein. So here I write a book. And here Random House publishes it. And he helps me shape that story. And it all happened. Once that book is out there, it's like a child. His legs of its own goes where it wants to go. Went straight into the lap of Susan Sarandon as soon as it came out in paperback. And she's the one who made the movie happen. She's the one who realized we needed another kind of film. There have been formalistic kind of death penalty films. Is he guilty or not? Did he do it or not? Or she? Yeah, okay, yeah, they're guilty. Okay, justice is done. In with the execution. End of reflection. And so she persuaded Tim. And then Tim did Dead Man Walking. And it got 4 nominations. There were 1.3 billion people. It was on the Feast of the Bloomin' Annunciation when we had the Academy Awards. And it gave it over to the world. It's bigger than me. Far, far, far more bigger than me, the whole story. And there it went out to the world. I was in Japan 6 weeks after the Academy Awards and bumped the book up to the New York Times bestseller list. And the taxi cab driver went Dead Man Walking. It got enough of that, you know. It was in a New York cartoon. You know, these 2 women sitting on the couch and husband waking up in the morning making his way to coffee. He goes, Dead Man Walking. It got enough of that, you know. And it's a great resurrection image. Great resurrection image. It's bigger than us. But we do our humble work. We are true to what we see and what we witness. And what we know, and that information we dig out. Jason taught me this too. He said, Helen, you put all your information about the death penalty, racism, how the poor get it, how the system works, down in the footnotes. Only the scholar's going to read the footnotes. The secret of good writing is story. People read for story, and you are going to shingle in all the important pieces of information you want the reader to know by the time they close the cover of that book. They have the most important things that they need to know about the death penalty and how it works, or doesn't. So are we not privileged? Are we not? Just to be awake is to be close to the fire. We could spend our whole lives not knowing the main issues of our day, or be involved in any kind of way, or being involved in the transformation of our society. I have met the American people. I've been in every state. I've been in and out of this city. I can't tell you how many times. And they're good. You know that it's in the Gospels, one of these 2 days, that Jesus looked at the crowd and he had compassion because they had no one. They had no leader to turn to. The people's heart are good. They're not wedded to the death penalty anymore. They're wedded to hating immigrants. But how do we bring them the stories to awaken that compassion? In the compassion is the fire. In the connection of human likeness. There's a great aria. I was just in Madrid, Spain, for the opera of Dead Man Walking, which is another one of God's miracles, just taking that opera all over the place. But in the aria, the Sister Helen character, she sings, it's my journey to the truth, to Christ. And it ends with, make me strong, make me wise, make me human. Amen. And thus we are all on that journey, are we not? So it's great to be in your company tonight. Thank you for the work you do, all of you, for who you are, and bringing faith. The gospel of Jesus. I mean, all I know about young people is, I just was in New Jersey and talked to a gym full of 1,000 kids sitting in their chairs. And they all listened to that story because the power is in the story. And they're longing to do something with their lives. They're longing for a big purpose. They're longing to give their lives over to something bigger than themselves. So let us go. Let's be bold about it. Let's do what we have to give. Thank you very much.